Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to the fourth concurrent session of the day, Equitable Assessment in the Community College Classroom. Our presenter today is Gregory Ramirez, faculty member at Madera Community College. If you have any questions for our presenter during the session, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we'll address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I'll hand it over to our presenter.
Got to unmute myself. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for attending my session this afternoon. And thank you also to IES for allowing me to have a session as part of it. I'm going to go ahead and hit the share screen feature in just a second. That should be able to bring things up. Let's see here, or let me see if it. Oh, my apologies. I'm trying to go ahead and get to it. I should have it up in just a quick minute. I guess I got a little bit thrown off right here. This should, or is this actually, my apologies for the delay.
And no, if you need me to share screen, I can do that as well.
Oh, no, it's just I should have had it open, ready to go, I guess. Just maybe a little bit of quick little nerves kind of kicking in or whatever, but let me try this once more. It should open up, right? I thought I had hit the open on my end, but now of course I got to share the screen, or I got to click on the window. But as was said, though, this is the Equitable Assessment in the Community College Classroom. Again, my name is Gregory Ramirez, and I'm out at Madera Community College. I've been there actually teaching full-time since 2008, so I am in my 15th year over there at the college, and I'm going to go ahead and get that screen share right now, and I'll even go ahead and turn it over to where it is the full screen right here. And so this morning, or this afternoon, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of share with all of you some ideas about how to go ahead and tackle how to apply equity in the classroom, some ideas. And even though I'm speaking as a community college instructor, this certainly is applicable even if you're at a university or wherever else, I imagine, because I'm going to be citing an author who actually is more focused on K through 12, and yet his ideas are most definitely applicable, as I'll get to a little bit later. But first of all, I think it's worthwhile to spend just, maybe a refresher, or if I say the term equity, I know what's interesting is I brought up the term equity the other day to my students. And although, my students said this, she wasn't the first one to give me the response and saying, equity relates to, what you build up in your house, basically, after owning it for a while. And it's kind of one of those terms, or I guess you could even maybe say buzzwords that we're hearing in academia, but I just figured it would be worthwhile to start with this. And I figure this is actually a good reference, or just kind of a good little, springboard for it. But as you can see, it's referring to fairness and justice, distinguished from equality. And of course, I think the idea is that, we oftentimes might say, well, what about equality? I mean, I thought that that's what we're going for right here. But as you can see right here, it's saying, providing the same to all in terms of equality. But equity, on the other hand, I'm just kind of skimming through this right here, is saying that, we don't start at the same place. We have to acknowledge and make adjustments to those imbalances, and certainly striving rather than starting or focusing just strictly on an equal, how should I say, starting point, trying to go ahead and work towards more of an equal outcome, and trying to go in that realm right there. And the chances are you may have illustration that I'm putting up right here, and I actually like this particular one quite a bit for the reason that this one I think takes into account, one could argue, accessibility, but you can see right here with the individual who is in the wheelchair not being able to use the box that's even available. And so you can see right here that they all have the same box on the left. The first one, doesn't seem to really have much of a problem looking over in this illustration. The middle one can, just barely look over. But then, of course, the third one on the right is excluded. But when we look at the equity aspect of that, not only do we give a much better view for the one in the middle, the one on the left is just fine in the blue jeans. And then the ramp is provided for the one in the wheelchair, therefore allowing certainly that aspect of equity, so that one, no one is missing out in terms of what is being offered in terms of the game right there. And I'm not sure how many soccer fans we might have out there, but normally when I see an illustration along these lines, I usually see baseball, but in this particular one, it happens to be soccer right here. On to the next slide right here. As you can see, this actually was, was taken from my capstone project, a citation that we see from Anderson and Speck, in which it says that it would seem that traditional grading practices are deeply imprinted on teachers' thinking. So even though teachers affirm the need for greater freedom in evaluating students' writing, they are still captives of grading practices that work counterintuitively in the writing process classroom. I would be the first to admit, and I've been teaching long enough to go ahead and say that when I first entered the classroom, I obviously just taught the way that I had been taught, in the classroom. And the first time I ever had a chance to be in a classroom, of course, was when I was a graduate student at Fresno State. And so I just kind of remember and look back on that and just, realize, wow, what a world of difference. And also being willing to go ahead and challenge and maybe rethink some of the approaches that I have been so used to. And I'm going to bring up a couple of things that we are, I think, very much used to, or we just accept as the norm in academia. But certainly, right here, as we see with this particular quotation, there's at least that admission, or at least that observation, that we are just kind of using it as a sort of default in terms of our personal experience. Now, I'm going to move on to this next slide right here. And I should point out that this individual does not, how should I say, sugarcoat things. He's not as, I guess, kind as what we would see with this particular citation right here. But for those of you familiar with Asalbi Inouye, he is a prominent name. If you're not, he's a prominent name, I would say, in current composition theory. But in his book, Anti-Racist Writing Assessment Ecologies, he actually says the following. He says that white students uniformly and historically do better on most, if not all, writing assessments, large scale or classroom. It may not be intentional, but it is racism. And it is a product of the writing assessment ecologies we create. And so right there, he's pointing at the imbalance right there, and certainly calling into question just the way it's even set up. And he actually even goes further with this in terms of, if we look at his another book of his, or another resource of his right here, where he's flat out just saying that according to him, grading is a racist and white supremacist practice. Grading is almost always employed in order to control students, and sometimes their teachers, force students to be accountable, and sometimes their teachers, and measure or rank students, and sometimes their teachers, either against each other or against a single standard. So once again, we're seeing, I would say, at least with him being, even though as, it may not be comfortable to hear those particular words, but he is, I think, really kind of calling out and suggesting that, traditional methods really are counterproductive, and really are just in many ways kind of just perpetuating equities in terms of what we're doing. So, kind of going back to what I had said a few slides ago about that idea of equity being a sort of buzzword in academia, I was there in terms of being able to hear it. And I would say for quite some time, I was even kind of, okay, so that we're focused on equity. We want to go ahead and tackle this and address this and so forth. But how can I be more equitable? That was something that, I think I was afraid to ask for fear of sounding kind of like, just kind of sounding bad, if you will. How do you exactly apply this? How can this really be done, I would say? And fortunately, I've encountered, I would say, some literature that has kind of steered me in this direction, and a bunch of different, being able to network and various sources right here. I would just say the place to start is simply by just rethinking, some of the common assessment practices that we do. And oftentimes we find this in terms of attendance policies, penalties for late out of class essays, assigning or giving zeros to non-submissions or missing assignments. And then I would also even argue total points overall that you have in a class. And I'm going to go ahead and go through these, and hopefully I'm not going too fast for all of you, but hopefully I'm just kind of, laying the groundwork, and you'll see how I kind of come back to each one of these and take some time to go ahead and address them. But in terms of my preparation for this PowerPoint, I want to go ahead and say that I did come across an old presentation that I did. It was, oh my goodness, I had it, I thought I had it in mind. It was the Conference on Acceleration in Developmental Education. That's what CADE stands for, in case anyone was wondering. It was in San Diego. And I just, the purpose of it was basically kind of countering complacency in the college classroom. Right there was kind of the, topic of what I was looking at. So I was kind of throwing out kind of the traditional maybe mindset, or a common mindset we might find, especially I would say among like tenured faculty. I know because I was there at one point myself, in terms of thinking something just very similar to this. I listed several, sentiments, as I would call it. This one saying right here, I had it tough when I was in school. If I was able to overcome obstacles, there's no reason they can't, they being the students. But then I offer this example. I did have another slide with it, but more specifically, if I go ahead and bring this into attention right here, hey, there are some technical advances that I would definitely say have played out. And even since, being in school right here, for myself, when I earned my master's degree, I earned it, I want to say in 2002, or if we want to go back to the undergraduate, it was 2000. So even if we were just playing with just the year 2000, what do we have right here? The internet. We could talk about how online classes, in that regard has expanded beyond belief. Cell phone usage, cell phones, anyone with any memory knows that they're a lot different now than what they were even just 10 years ago, or 5, right? Social media, goodness gracious, MySpace was such a big thing nowadays, and Facebook is like something incredible. However, it's kind of funny because my students these days, even my own children, consider Facebook to be passé. There's other platforms. I would even argue, with mental health awareness. And if we took into account historical events, I'm at a point where, quite honestly, some of my students are too young, if not, they were actually born after the September 11th attacks, the tragedy that took place in 2001. The Great Recession, of course, we think about that and what kind of effects that had right there. What was it, like around 2008 approximately, when that took effect right there. And even if we, I look at the concept of when President Obama was elected around that time, and also just understanding that having the first African-American president, was really, kind of like change things, you would just say right there. And then, if we take a look at, and keeping in mind that that's just the 2000s, I mean, what about the 2010s? If we look at, Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court case that allowed for same-sex marriage. We also look at maybe Trump being elected. And again, like I said, this is 2019 that I'm taking these slides from. I'm trying to go somewhere here. And by the way, again, 2019, can anyone say COVID? So my point is that, wow, I personally did not see the pandemic, coming on, nor the kind of like mandatory switch to remote learning. I would even kind of point out that, when I was first hearing about COVID, I was thinking, oh, here we go again, media trumping up another, thing to where it is. But, I didn't in my imagination imagine it being to the degree that it would be. And sure enough, I know things are kind of settling down, so to speak. We're returning to the classroom and so forth. But to say that, it didn't change things, especially for the classroom or just in terms of just academia, that would be a falsehood to make such a statement or such an observation right there. So hopefully I'm making sense in terms of why I was wanting to kind of just do this quick retrospective, just in terms of trying to suggest that here we are, 2023, and if we had that mindset that the students don't have any kind of challenges outside the classroom, things that are going to distract them, we need to be, I think, quite honest and really kind of be willing to take account for the different kind of challenges that our students oftentimes do face. Now, in terms of, with that being said, the attendance policies, and I should point out that kind of moving forward, or before I move any bit further, I want to just present that idea that, of course, I'm all for instructor autonomy. So with that being said, with what I'm about to share, obviously feel free, to use as much of this as you want, as little of this as you want, none of it at all, even, or, feel free to modify this, because it ultimately comes up to you to go ahead and decide that. I completely understand that, respect that. And I would also just kind of say, in relation to the attendance policies, I might also say stick to whatever your institution's policies are. I know for mine, really quickly, we would drop a student, or we do suggest or state that, a student can be dropped prior to what is the final drop date, which is basically midway through the term, however that long that term is. For fall and spring, if it's, the full semester, then we're looking at 18 weeks. So, that would be a 9-week, 9 weeks in is when that final drop date would come into play right there. But as you can see, in terms of additional approaches, I think it's safe to say that, probably what we commonly see is, deducting points if the student has a certain amount of absences. We might even kind of go ahead and suggest that, hey, this is, there's some subjectivity here. We assess like how much you're actually putting into it, how much you're speaking up. But we would deduct points if the student, say, for example, misbehaves or is distracting or disruptive. And then maybe even a roundabout way to do that might be in terms of administering quizzes. Something that I learned from I guess it's safe to say, to go ahead and call her mentor, but she's at a different institution. But she had suggested the idea of, instead of hitting the wrong button here, instead of doing that, assigning what I call weekly reflections. She refers to it as exit tickets, or I believe it's referred to as exit tickets, as being a more appropriate way. And in some ways, this also probably, I would argue, I just started doing this semester. I would say that this also kind of helps, of course, keeping track of attendance, but not having to deal with like excused or unexcused absences to that degree right there. But with the weekly reflections, grading them as complete or incomplete, not so much based on the quality of what they're writing, but more so based on whether they do it or not, whether they get it in on time, whether it's on topic right here. So I thought I'd go ahead and include an example of what I would do here. And you can see that I provide instructions and I keep it pretty brief. Minimum of 50 words, no more than 300 words. I'm not asking for anything that's too arduous on the student's behalf. And even with the prompt right here, as you can see, I'm even letting the students know up front that they don't have to answer every single question, even though I list a series of questions right here. But hopefully you can see from the prompt itself that I'm referring to, or at least kind of gauging where the students are in terms of what we're doing, in terms of some of the activities that we have, and trying to see where they are. I'm asking right here as well about an upcoming essay that I introduced to them with the prompt and rubric, trying to see if there's any questions, and also letting them know, hey, you know what, no one else is going to see this except me, so don't be afraid. Maybe there might be some trepidation about wanting to share this out loud in front of others, but I'm giving them that opportunity to even share it with me, and not even having to share it with me directly, verbally or in person, if that's even a little bit more intimidating itself. And then as there's reference to essay number 1, I'm going to get to this aspect right here about having not submitted it. I'll address that in just a couple of minutes right here. However, I'm asking, like, hey, if you haven't submitted essay number 1, maybe what could we do, or what could be done to maybe allow you to do that, or maybe try to help you get that in as soon as possible. So again, that's an approach that I'm suggesting in relation to attendance. In terms of out of class essays right here, I think we are probably accustomed to certain and I would say these are traditional policies right here. This is assuming that the instructor even accepts late work, or late essays to begin with. Some don't, just depending on, again, the instructor. But I think it's safe to say that if the instructor does in fact do it, chances are they are going to deduct points. They may not allow for rewrites. They may turn around and say, okay, I'll read it, but I'm going to not put very many comments on it. You're not going to get as many comments, as you would if you turned it in on time. And there would even be that idea of, I'm going to go ahead and you turned it in late, so I'm going to turn it in at a different time than other people, right, or your classmates right here. I'll turn it back to you whenever I feel like it. Basically, it might be kind of more or less the subtext of what's being shared. And if you have not ever read this particular book or heard of it, I would highly recommend it. If you're looking I think I accidentally clicked on that. I hope the screen doesn't change right here. Oh goodness, let's see. Okay, I hyperlinked it. That's right, I had forgotten about that. But anyway, Joe Feldman's Grading for Equity. I had mentioned earlier the author of he kind of focuses again on K through 12. This particular author right here, I would, even though he's more of a K through 12 mindset, it's still applicable, I would say, to the college classroom. But in one particular passage that I have here on the screen, you'll see that he says that late work penalties can disproportionately hurt the most vulnerable students. They may not have been able to control all the circumstances that cause the assignment to be late, and our implicit biases influence the assumption we make about whether they had. Wow, I think as I read that particular one, and by the way, this was published in 2019, so pre-pandemic, but talk about, at least I would feel, about being very appropriate for what we witnessed as educators as a result of the pandemic and the different adjustments that had to be made with remote learning, and just with what students were dealing with in general, with jobs and with families and other areas. The implicit biases, I know I would just, kind of wonder, oh, they're just being lazy, or they don't understand the idea of punctuality. I've had those thoughts cross my mind. I'm not going to lie, as an educator, too much, and how should I say, unfairly using myself as a reference point, kind of going back to what I had said as a sentiment. If I was able to do it, why can't they? Kind of attitude right there. And so I would just make the suggestion here that if you are, let's see here. I just want to make sure that I have this correct right here as the alternative. Excuse me. And this is actually the focus of what I did for my capstone in relation to my doctorate, rather than kind of sticking with what we were used to with those traditional policies about late work. Maybe instead offering a soft deadline approach, and in that one offering or allowing the opportunity for students to say, hey, if you are able to get it in by this particular deadline, you're going to get a chance at unlimited rewrites to go ahead and earn whatever grade it is that you're wanting to earn right there. And just kind of giving that to the students right there. If they were to go ahead and not meet that particular deadline that's first set aside or first established, then offer at least one rewrite, but to do so under certain conditions. And the next screen will kind of show or elaborate a little bit more with what I am getting at right here. Particularly, something that I started doing this semester is having, as you can see, a little table that reminds them in terms of, hey, here's the incentive. And if you want to take advantage of that particular incentive, get it in by this particular deadline right here, as you can see. So, I'd mentioned the unlimited rewrites as, of course, the first one right there. Other things that instructors will do, I've known with rewrites in the past, and I did this for many years in terms of, just allowing for one rewrite, but taking whatever the better grade is of the two submissions. So if they did, let's just say, and I'm just going to go ahead and use the traditional 100 points right here. If they earned, let's just say an 82, and then they were able to bump it up to a 92, stick with the 92. When I talk about average grade, well, sometimes what I've known some instructors to do is instead of going with the 92 over the 82, they'll add those divided by 2. And just offhand, I think my math skills are still working with me. That would be an 87. So that's the one that goes in the grade book. And then finally, with what we have right there where it says full credit only, so it wouldn't be any rewrite opportunity, but it would just kind of be a sort of one and done deal right there, giving them up until, at least my willingness to give them up until the last week of instruction, the week prior to finals, to go ahead and get that particular essay in right there. And I think it just boils down to this. If I had to simply put it right here is don't penalize, but incentivize. Try to find a way to go ahead and get those students, a way to kind of get interested or find some sort of, appeal to that intrinsic motivation for the students, as opposed to trying to, wag the finger at them and suggest that they need to, get it in or else. Using that type of idea right there. Now, my guess is that I wouldn't doubt if just maybe someone here in this Zoom room right here is kind of thinking to themselves, what if they don't submit the essay at all? And that's a perfectly legitimate question right there. Well, and hang tight for what I'm about to share right there, because this might be a little bit radical for some people. But rather than assigning a 0 to a missing essay, consider assigning half credit to that, or 50% regardless right there. So and please hear me out, because when I first heard about this, I'll admit I first heard about this regarding a high school teacher, I want to say in Florida, who actually got fired because I guess the school's policy was to assign 50 instead of the 0. And so anyway, at first I thought that's completely absurd. That is absurd. But please hear me out about this. The reason why I would just encourage this kind of thought pattern right here, and if I said traditional grading scale and I put it up on the screen right here, I don't even have to complete it. you'll see for yourself. You could, my guess is that many of you would be able to complete it yourselves right here. Of course, 90 to 100, that's an A, 80 to 89 is a B. If we keep going with that right there, my best guess is that, many of you, if not all of you, can fill in the blanks. And when you think about it right there, we have what 59 or 0 to 59 is in fact an F. One way to kind of think about it, and Joe Feldman was the one in his book Grading for Equity to kind of say, if you think about it right there, 0 to 59, that's a good chunk of the 100 points right there. In fact, that's what was it, 0 to 59, that's 60 of the, if we count 0 to 100, that's 60 of the 101 points. So that's mathematically skewed towards an F. Not only that, but I might even point out that if we were in fact to go ahead and just do the 50, it's still an F, mathematically speaking, if we go by that. And then also as well, if one thinks about it or maybe looks back on their teaching and even kind of thinking about even some of the students that we might even say at first, wow, that student surprised me with how well they were doing. And then they don't turn in a particular essay or assignment, and then wow, it really shoots their grade down because mathematically that's exactly what the 0 is going to do. It's going to really, it's almost impossible, basically, mathematically speaking, to go ahead and kind of overcome that. It becomes, I would just say, virtually insurmountable. It would in fact be this gentleman right here who, in the case against the 0, makes the point of saying, hey, doing the 50 or half credit approach, that's not giving students 50 points. Rather, it is awarding a punishment that fits the crime. The students failed to turn in an assignment, so they receive a failing grade. They are not sent to a Siberian labor camp, according to Douglas B. Reeves right here. So I think the idea as well is also maybe making the concession that the student might have actually turned in quality work if they had actually bothered to turn it in. So to actually say a flat out 0 would just be, would be too much, in terms of assuming that they couldn't do that whatsoever. In fact, I might even, I guess, a couple of quick things it makes me think of is the SATs. I mean, even the SATs, how should I say, a standardized test, even they don't award 0 points to a test taker. Not to mention that if you think of your favorite sport, chances are they don't hold the games that the athlete didn't play in terms of their statistics. They don't hold that against them, or they don't count that. They just strictly go based on the games that they played. So, just kind of thinking maybe in terms of those quick comparisons to, again, kind of further this point. But if you insist on keeping the 0, there is a nice little happy medium, I suppose you could still go with. And again, this is, we find this in Feldman, or at least I can, find it in Feldman right here, is maybe using an assignment that has a 0 to 4 point scale. That way, the 4 represents the A, 3 the B, and so forth. I'm using this, I'll be honest, this first semester that I'm actually kind of using that concept, and I'm using it for what are called timed writings. That would be in-class essays, ones where the students have 50 minutes to compose and work with whatever topic that they're given. So that would be, an example of that. I wouldn't use that. I mean, I personally have not done that for maybe more, how should I say, higher stakes assignments or summative, I guess you could, well, I take that back. It would be summative assessments, because there are a couple of units where I've used the time writing, to kind of wrap things up in terms of the discussion or the topics that we address with the reading assignments. And finally, one other thing, or a couple other points I wish to make would be the following right here. Consider fewer points for summative assessments, and just fewer points overall. So what I mean by that is rather than having 100 points for an out-of-class essay, maybe change that and simplify it to where it is 10 points possible instead. And I would make the case of saying what genuinely might be the difference, or what really is the difference between, say, an 81 and an 88, let's just say, for a particular essay. I know we, add up the points maybe from a rubric, but in reality, it's, I guess I kind of fall back to the default of saying, an A is an A or a B is a B in that sense. The other thing too that I might just kind of suggest is, rather than 1,000 points, which I had been doing for years, rather than doing that, just changing it to 100. And I know that I think 1,000 points makes it easy in regards of percentages, but so does keeping it at 100 as well. And also too, maybe it even helps with borderline grades. I would just say, well, what about if it is 89.5%? Do we round that up? I usually would, but then, now that I'm on the 100-point scale, if you will, it's more sensible to say 90 to 100, 80 to 89 for myself right here. And so let me see right here, as I am looking at the clock right here, I did want to go ahead and share this particular slide right here, or the slides of different works cited, or ones that I'm referencing or have referenced as part of this particular session. And then you see, of course, Salby Inouye listed twice right there. I included myself. Normally I don't cite myself, but I did earlier, if you remember, with the CADE presentation. So I decided to include that right there. And finally, I figure I could go ahead and put this right here. And I hope I'm not ending this too early for the moderators, but nevertheless, right here, I do have my email address in case anyone wishes to contact me. And I do have a website. In fact, this actually kind of kicks me to say that I need to update it. There are a few things that I haven't had the chance to, maybe include, or conference, presentations. I've got a couple of papers, or a couple of written works that are, in the works to being included in different books. One's a collaborative, and then one's, an individual or solo performance, I guess you could call it. But nevertheless, I just wanted to go ahead and put that there for you. And so I guess with that being said, I believe this would be the time that we would turn things over to the Q&A. So I'll go ahead and mute myself then. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We do have a couple of questions. The first is, do participants get slides of your presentation? So would you feel comfortable with them emailing you to get the slides from today? You're muted.
No, I know I'm muted. My apologies. It was the weirdest thing, is that I was trying to click the button to unmute and I couldn't see the arrow. So my apologies for that. Yeah, I'd be more than willing to go ahead and email this to anybody who might be interested in the presentation. In fact, one thing that I should do, like I said, I need to update my website, is to go ahead and maybe even put it up there for people to access in the future. Goodness, I have some quite a few things on my to-do list. I'll have to add that to it. So maybe like emailing me, especially if it's anywhere, within the next like few days or whatever, would probably be the best bet to get a hold of this particular PowerPoint if anyone's interested in it. Absolutely. I actually, thank you for having the interest in wanting to do that. I feel flattered that anybody would want any memory of me following this particular presentation, but thanks again.
Thank you for that offer. Another question, not meant to be nasty, it says, their wording. Where is the line between being sensitive to equity concerns and then being, quote unquote, a sucker? Maybe frozen, or either take a really long sip of water. There we go. Were you able to hear the?
Okay, so I heard something, I just heard
Okay.
not to be nasty, is that in the
So an instructor said not to be nasty, but where is the line between being sensitive to equity concerns and being quote unquote a sucker?
Wow, no, that's a wonderful question. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I could actually define that. Uh, I mean, and I guess that would be a subjective thing. And I totally understand that. I totally get that right there. In terms of being a sucker, I think that, like I said, it boils down to, I think just the personal respect right there. I know that I probably sound in some ways a little, I guess for lack of better words, crazy maybe to accept work up until the, or at least out of class essays. And by the way, I want to make it clear that I don't accept all late work or all assignments as late work. I do, I'm more gracious about the, how should I say, like the out of class essays in terms of that deadline, as opposed to such things as like the weekly reflections that I referred to earlier. The line, I could not like pinpoint or just kind of boom say like the line is right here, so to speak. I think that that's just, again, it just goes back to instructor autonomy and just kind of maybe saying to yourself and kind of going with my little disclaimer earlier on and saying that, hey, as much as you want from this, as little as you want from this, nothing at all, modify it to your content. So yeah, I'm sorry. It's almost like I can't give you an answer on that, but certainly I think just understanding that, I mean, I guess just a reminder that, all of us, and I've seen it too. I guess there's a personal element that just kind of kicks in. My college, real quick, it wasn't always a college. When it wasn't a college when I got there, I'll just put it to you that way. I did serve as accreditation coordinator when we did attain the college status to write our first, oh my goodness, institutional self-evaluation report, what we refer to as an ICER. And so, I just kind of think to myself, here are some, what's the right word? Like some of my colleagues, and I would even say, a couple of administrators or whatever, where I gave them a deadline of wanting to, see the draft of a particular portion, so that way we could put it together and get things moving so we could meet the overall deadline. And of course, being asked for some grace, in terms of saying, oh, I need a little bit more time. So I think there's that element where, we all probably, at one point in our careers or in terms of a particular task or project, say, you know what, something happened, or I wasn't able to do it, or I wasn't able to finish it on time like I had hoped or you had asked. So is there anything, or would it be okay if I had just a little bit extra time on that? And, yeah, so I would just kind of maybe default to that aspect where, where there's that element. But certainly I'm sorry if I can't give you an exact answer. And I understand it not, and I thank you for the little disclaimer not to sound nasty, because I know the sucker thing, and I worry about that myself. But I think at the end of the day, just remembering that my students, are in the community college. I personally did not attend a community college, and the only time I attended a community college, I dropped that class that first day. I went straight to, the 4-year university. So for myself, I have to remind myself that my students are coming from a different angle and a different approach, different background than what I would have in terms of, the opportunity and being able to excel academically.
And one more quick question, just to follow up with that. I'm going to summarize the question that was sent. What's the counterpoint of this argument where this could potentially be a disadvantage to the other students who are turning things in on time?
Oh yeah, that's a good one right there too. Yeah, no, and I think, certain skills, and I think that's a sort of, what's the right word? Maybe like subtext we're trying to get to our students, like to learn certain principles, to be, what's the right word? Oh my gosh, like punctual, and like I said, I think the idea, as I'd mentioned before, is, the punctual students are getting a rather nice incentive where they can write the grade or rewrite it to whatever grade that they want. They could go for the full, in my case, 10 out of 10 if they were to, only earn, let's just say, a 7, and they weren't content with that. Some students are. But on the same note too, I think the other thing as well, I may have kind of hinted at that, is some students can be unpredictable in terms of the students that, let's just say, are doing quite well. And I think one of the things that maybe served as a sort of inspiration for this is that I did have a opportunity, a colleague in mine, to take, well, actually, yeah, we took some students to Ireland for 2 weeks, and then we had a how should I say, we did it where we did it was an 8-week total, our course during the summer. In fact, I guess that's why I can't forget. That's why I'm wearing my green shirt, kind of like an early happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. But anyway, I remember one particular student did quite well, like early on, in terms of getting those assignments in and so forth. And then, and then this after the drop date, after the trip to Ireland, still having to turn things in, approaching me, contact me and suggesting like, hey, I recognize or I acknowledge that this, stuff was, I hadn't been turning it in, and, I had some things on my end right here. Would it still be okay? And my mindset was, well, if you could get it in, I guess, in the next week. I mean, that's a lot to do, but the student did it. And so I guess with that being said, as well, as that sometimes I would just kind of maybe, at least in my case, maybe make the argument that it's a little bit hard to really kind of predict exactly what might happen in a student's life, or just basically kind of assume that just because they're off to a great start that they're going to end at a great start right there. But I think overall, just maybe realizing, and I think again, it's still there for the students to be able to excel and to be able to honor those students that are in fact more punctual than the others.
Thank you for that. And on that note, it looks like we are out of time. Thank you, Gregory, for all of the valuable information you share with us today. And the next concurrent sessions will begin at 4:00 p.m. Eastern. You can view the chat for upcoming session links or access the conference website for all of the upcoming concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference site, don't forget to swing by our virtual exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team. While you're there, you can view a quick 5-minute demonstration, request your t-shirt, and be entered to win a $50 hourly giveaway. Also, in the spirit of St. Patrick's Day, like your green shirt, you'll find a few golden coins hidden throughout the conference website. So click on those coins to be entered into an additional raffle, and we will see you at the next session. Thank you again, Dr. Ramirez.
All right, thank you again, everyone.